Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show helping men to open up about manhood. My name is Simon Rennie and my aim is to get men talking. From mental health to fatherhood and everything in between, Mindful Men creates a safe space for conversation. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to say a huge thank you for joining me. It means a world for you to join me and talk about men's issues. And if you love what you hear, please subscribe and share the episode with your mates. You can also join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to connect with you there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about mental health. Now, a trigger warning that some people might get a bit triggered by the conversation we're about to have today. And that's okay. If you do get triggered, feel free to skip this episode. Or if you do stick around and you are triggered, make sure you check into your support networks, whether or not it's a friend or a family member or a mental health professional. And today I've got Jarrod Gentle on the line, a dad, a mental health crusader, and the host of the Stay Mental Australia podcast. How are you going today, Jarrod?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm good. We've had 2 days in a row of almost 30 degrees. So I think summer is just around the corner and I've got to get my swimming pool cleaned. So that might be what I'm doing this afternoon. But how are things going down?
Yesterday morning, the sun come up and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And we had that first glimpse of like summer's coming. But then it just did typical Melbourne. Clouds rolled in and it's been cold as shit all weekend. But yeah.
4 seasons in one day.
Yeah.
So you're in Melbourne. Like, are you a big footy fan?
I'm a Melbourne supporter.
Oh, no.
So yeah, our time's over for this year, but yeah, there's always next year.
Yeah, there's been some cracking games in the AFL. I was watching the Swans and Collingwood last night. It was a nail biter, and given my team was almost near the bottom, so I'm an Adelaide Crows fan, so I tend to go for any non-Victorian teams when we're knocked out. So it's good to see Sydney in the grand final against Geelong. So it should be a cracking game next week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. Yeah, Collingwood did their typical thing, come back late in the last quarter, and yeah, it was a good game to watch. The whole final series has just been cracking. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's a big game for me every year. It's something that I usually get around mates and have a few beers, have a few hot dogs. So, do you do anything special for grand final day?
There's nothing that's set in stone every year. We just wing it and go from house to house and see who wants to host it. But yeah, it is usually a social day where you get to catch up with your mates and yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Now, mate, I love talking to dads. And before I get into your story about mental health, I'd love to hear a bit about you and also what it means to you to be a dad.
Yeah. So I had my first child when I was in my mid-20s. And then I got married and had my second child. I then went through a divorce and am now a stepfather to 2 more children. So we've got a bit of a Brady Bunch thing going on. But yeah, to be a father, it's hard to describe it sometimes because when you don't have kids, you don't look at it the same way. After you have a kid, everything changes. Like you just get this big change of perspective and you're not doing things for yourself anymore. You're doing it for other people. And it's a really a big learning process. And yeah, so I love it.
And how old are your kids?
So my youngest is 12, my son, and then we've got my daughter who's 14, my stepdaughter who's also 14, and a 16-year-old stepson.
Wow, you're a bit further advanced than I am. I'm in that 2.5 and 5.5 year old stages. You can probably hear them belting around in the room next to me. They're out there packing stuff away, and they love doing a bit of cooking on the weekends with their mum. So we might even get a 2-year-old that jumps into the podcast later on. But mate, tell us a bit about your story about growing up. I know you've got a mental health story, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of the mental health stuff. But maybe aside from the mental health journey that you've been on, maybe where'd you grow up? What do you do for work?
So I grew up in Hurstbridge, a little town northeast suburbs of Melbourne. People come to Hurstbridge and go, wow, this is the sticks. Like it's pretty bushy and stuff like that. But just north of us is Kinglake Ranges, and that's what we call the sticks. So It is a really beautiful little town, but growing up through my teenage years, there wasn't really much to do on the weekend. So that's where we sort of started experimenting with a bit of weed and drugs and stuff like that. And then yeah, into my 20s. Oh, so after I finished year 11, went to Diamond Valley Secondary College, finished year 11, fell into a painting and decorating apprenticeship,
Mhm.
and have been doing that ever since. So
Yeah, cool. And so how did you fall into that kind of line of work? Was it a trade always on the mind, or were you thinking uni, or not really thinking much about the future at all? Or
no, I was really just looking for a part-time job through the school holidays. Coming up to 17 years old, wanted a little bit of spending money for, typical alcohol or drugs or whatever on weekends. But yeah, a job come up for an apprenticeship, and my uncle was a painter as well, and the bloke he was working for had an apprenticeship position open, and yeah, just gave it a try and enjoyed it, and just never looked back.
yeah, and have you ever worked for yourself, or do you work for other people?
No, I've worked for other people on and off over the years, but I've pretty much worked for myself, since being qualified.
And is it something that you're going to stick around in, or do you ever think, like in my career pathway, I've always thought about, oh, what might I do in 10 years' time? Has that ever crossed your mind, or you think this is going to be it until the day you die?
There was a period that ties into the mental health story, where I was very stressed about work. I was going through some financial shit, and I thought, what if, I had another business or an idea where I could make more money and give my kids more and have a bigger house and a better car and all this sort of stuff. And I did sort of look into other career paths, you could say. But really, at the end of the day, I enjoy it so much, and it'd be a job that I'd be happy to do until I literally cannot walk up a ladder anymore. But yeah, it's a very satisfying job. I get a lot of good rapport with my clients and a lot of positive feedback all the time. So yeah, it's a really, really satisfying job. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, as I said before, your story is a mental health story. And on the 8th of September, we had Are You OK Day. And I haven't had a chance to talk to you about how you're going lately. It's been a couple of weeks since we last chatted. I like to make most days an Are You OK Day myself, given that I've come from a mental health space. So I'd like to really dive in a little bit deeper and see how you're going today from a mental health perspective.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, especially from my mum, because I put her through a lot of shit. Like she'll go like, "How are you going?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm really good." And she goes, "Is that just your programmed answer? Like, are you just
Mm-hmm.
saying that?" But to be honest, the last year or so have been the best year of my life. Like I'm so mentally focused and on board with self-care and looking after it and preventing what I'd been through happening again.
Yep.
So yeah, I am good. I'm really good.
Oh, that's great to hear. I had a great chat about Are You OK Day with Dave Pearce from Here for Each Other. We did an Instagram live during the week about dads groups and men's groups and stuff like
Mm.
that. And he was reflecting on how the question, Are you okay, can be quite direct for a lot of people and quite standoffish. So I'm thinking from your experience, is being direct around mental health discussions good, or is there a better way to ask how we're going?
No, I think the direct approach is good. Like now that Are You OK Day is a nationally recognized day, it's good to have that day as a point of to start practicing asking that question and educating ourselves on how we have that conversation. Because a lot of people don't know how to have the conversation. And on Are You OK Day, I was at a job and a couple of blokes rocked up to do the gas meter. They were removing it or whatever. And we were out there sort of chatting. I go, "Oh, look, guys, it's Are You OK Day. So I'd like to check on you guys. Are you guys okay?" And they all sort of laughed and said, "Yeah, we had this egg and bacon breakfast and there were 200 blokes there and we were all sort of had this morning about it." And then they brought up this bloke who's like, "Oh, I'm not going to that." And he sort of tiptoed around it. And that sort of brought up alarm bells in my head. Like, that's what I used to do. I used to avoid that mental health chat. So I don't know if that's something that we should focus on when we do have a mental health organization doing a day. If there are people that are avoiding that conversation and excluding themselves from these sort of events, is that something we should look at and focus and maybe approach them on another day and just see if they're actually all right.
Yeah, it's a great response, and we had similar when I was talking to Dave about this. He was talking about men's groups, and we're talking about those kind of guys are like, I don't need a men's group. You know, why would I need to talk to other men about stuff? But it's very similar. The discussion is like, what are they avoiding? You know, and some people it might be like, yeah, I don't need to talk about mental health. It's fine. I'm good. You know, I don't need to go there. But for a lot of other people, it's kind of like an automatic response, how you said before, like with your mum. Like he's like, yeah, I'm good. And but there is something a bit deeper that we need to dive into. And by asking, are you okay? And I like to say, how are you really okay?
Yeah.
To try and dive a little bit deeper and crack that egg open and see what's going on inside. But anyway, let's go into your mental health story and see how mental health or mental illness has showed up in your life from various stages. So yeah, Mike, over to you just to tell about what your journey has been like in the mental health space.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. A year or two before that, I was actually misdiagnosed with depression and anxiety. I knew there was something wrong, so I went to the doctor. And because I went there in a depressive sort of state, because you don't go to the doctors when you're feeling really good and euphoric and happy and like you can take on the world, because you don't get taught that that's a bad thing to experience. But then when you come crashing down, that's when you sort of um, you need to make that choice to be proactive about it and do something about it. So the misdiagnosis and then being properly diagnosed sort of sent me on a journey of self-discovery and personal
Mm-hmm.
development to try and understand what it was and what was going on. And it did feel like a life sentence being put in this basket and then having to accept that was really difficult. But after I accepted it and started to learn about it and network with other people with bipolar and start learning from their experiences and stuff like that, I started to see that, there is a way that we can live and manage a disorder like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. You said bipolar 1. So for people that aren't familiar with bipolar, like, can you explain what that means?
So they put it on a sort of like a scale. So you've got bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and cyclothymia or something like that. It's like the lower level. But they all, even though it's bipolar 1, it's not necessarily worse than bipolar 2 or
Mm-hmm.
cyclothymia. We all experience it in a different way. And the main differences are how long the manic periods go for. So in bipolar 2, it's typical to have hypermania, which only last for between 3 and 7 days. But then when it goes over that time period and you're having manic periods for a week or 2 weeks or sometimes even months, that's where you get sort of put in that other category. So, yeah,
Yeah. And is that something that you've been experiencing for a long time? And you mentioned the misdiagnosis as well.
yeah.
Like how long ago was the misdiagnosis compared to when you got properly diagnosed?
It would have been 2018, late 2018, was the misdiagnosis, and the proper diagnosis was 2021, early 2021. So yeah, there was a couple of years in there of not quite knowing what's going on. But after sort of going back through my life, yeah, I've been experiencing it for a while, and I'm like looking back at these periods, going, "Fuck, that was a
Yeah.
manic episode there," or that could have been a depressive episode. And my experience with depressive episodes can be different to other people's, because I didn't have that opportunity to lay down, stay in bed, and not do anything for days. I had to get up and go to work and push through it. And so my depressive episodes come out through bursts of anger and frustration, because I was dealing with these emotions that I had no control over. And the best thing for me to let it out was with anger.
Yeah.
So
And was that coming out at the workplace or was that at home or
everywhere.
yeah?
Everywhere, yeah.
How did the anger look? Like what was it yelling? Was it
Um,
screaming or
just really quick to change from being, happy and good. And then one little thing would happen and there was no processing time. It'd just be an outburst of anger. The kids probably copped it a bit. My relationships throughout my whole life would have copped it, and not knowing it at the time. But there were times where going out with mates and going to the pubs and nightclubs and footy and stuff like that, most of the times would be pretty good. But
Mhm.
looking back on it now, the days where I'd have my hat on or a beanie on and I'd be trying to like keep to myself, those were the times where usually, yeah, fights would come up. And whether they were for no purpose at all or because someone else had instigated it, it was still me that, took it out and took it to that next level. And yeah, I've done things that I'm not not proud of. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like looking back on life, like was this something that showed up when you were a kid, or was it more when you were a teen or adult?
Um, it's really hard because some people can look at their timeline as a straight line and put a line in the sand, say this is when things started happening.
Yep.
And but mine was like a really slow development over years. Um, so yeah, it'd be too hard to put it down to
Yeah.
one experience or one stressful period of time. It was just a little adding a straw each time to the camel's back sort of thing. And yeah, it broke over time.
Yeah. So can you describe that moment that it did break? Like what was happening around that time? What was the kind of driver that you said, man, I've got to go and talk to someone about this?
There was a lot of financial pressure.
Hmm.
There were periods where, because of my impulse spending, I would get myself to a point where, I had a number of motorbikes in the garage, but I couldn't afford rent
Hmm.
the next week. And that stress would then, instead of talking about it, I'd bury myself in drugs and alcohol to try and avoid those discussions. And yeah, it was just it was like bottling it up and not
Yeah.
facing those problems and sorting them out, and just, yeah, letting it just get out of control. um
Yeah.
and relationship breakdowns, every time a new relationship would start, I'd sort of get elevated and go up, and then when a relationship broke down, I'd go down again. So yeah, there's when a relationship would end, these are periods of time where I'd be stressed and emotional and just stop thinking about the shit that you should be thinking about. But yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned drugs and alcohol, and often we before we get the actual proper help with medications or counseling or whatever it is, the way that we do get help, we tend to self medicate through things like alcohol and drugs, and myself included. Like I would use beer to kind of close the thought patterns going down in my brain to try and relax and also to socialize as well. Over time, I grew very introverted, and I'm still quite introverted today and socially anxious, but alcohol tends to bring out the party in me. Would that be kind of your experience? Like how did drugs and alcohol help you cope through those years?
Yeah, I found that I would try and use drugs and alcohol to pull myself back in. I wasn't trying to gain confidence to be myself. I was trying not to be myself. Like I was
Yeah.
scared of what was going on inside of me. So yeah, it was more of a trying to silence the thoughts, numb the emotions, and then just be not like I was trying to be normal. But yeah, it wasn't it wasn't working.
It doesn't work. It just keeps continuing the cycle. And kind of like the reason why I asked you about grand final day, like we're having this discussion this morning. We're catching up with some mates from Melbourne. They're coming up to the Gold Coast next week. And every year, grand final day for me is a great day. I love it. But it's one of those days where I get on the piss. And lately I'm starting to question that as I get a bit older, like, should I be doing this as often? Should I be drinking so much? Because I know the impact that alcohol has on our depression, and I
Mm.
experience depression, and so it's coming up. I'm getting a bit anxious about next week, actually, about what that might look like. Um, so that self medication can be quite disastrous, but we kind of get stuck in these cycles of almost like, oh, it's a big event's coming up. I've got to do it. I've got to have a drink next Saturday because it's grand final day. But I don't really want to. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of stuck in this cycle myself. And for a lot of guys out there, they fall into that same trap as well. They're like, oh, it's my birthday coming up, or it's somebody else's birthday coming up, or it's Christmas. To control everything that's going on in here, I've got to drink, or I've got to take drugs or whatever. It's quite a disastrous loop. And I feel like we've almost been conditioned, guys in Australia, growing up, that was a bit of a rite of passage, drinking, taking drugs or whatever. And you said, like, you grew up in a town where you didn't have much to do except for, get on the drugs and drinking and
Yeah.
so forth. Did you ever think when you were a teen, like, of getting out of that kind of environment, or it was one of those environments where you're like, no, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life?
No, well, I'm not gonna lie. I did enjoy those times. Like a lot of fun was had, but this is how the cycles and the habits get formed. Like when we're
Mm,
young, we go to a party on the weekend and we associate that party over time with drinking alcohol. So then that way the habit gets formed. So every time you think about going to a party, your brain hears party and then your body starts thinking alcohol. So that's how an addiction gets formed. So
yeah,
whether you're addicted to something that you just do every weekend or every day or once a month or once a year, like on grand final day, you have that thought, I'm going to go to grand final day. Your body remembers, oh, this is the day that we drink lots of alcohol. So
yeah,
already it's starting to crave the alcohol and build those cells ready to receive it as well. So addictions very complex, but once we understand it, it is something that can help us fight it. So
yeah,
yeah, you think grand final day and straight away dopamine's being released and it's starting to get your body ready for alcohol. So this is just a habit really.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
if you're getting nervous about it, like I've been off alcohol for most of this year and it's changed a lot and it's made so much beneficial change in me, to the point now that I can go out for dinner with my mates and they're all big drinkers. Like we've had a lot of alcohol in our lives, and I can go out now and not drink, and I'll be going. This will be the first grand final day that I ever go to, being sober, and I'm prepared for that. Like I've got a non-alcoholic beer that I drink, and I can go there and have just as much fun as everybody else. But this time I'll be actually watching the game and enjoying it, and then waking up the next day
yeah,
without a hangover.
yeah. I haven't actually drank non-alcoholic beer. Like, what's it taste like?
At the start, it's pretty shit because you're sort of drinking it and go, "What the fuck's the point of this?" Um, but yeah, it is. It's just that keeping the hand busy, and you feel like you're not sitting there not drinking, and you still feel connected to the group, sort of thing, and you're still sitting there drinking, laugh, and it does. It's still you sort of almost get placebo high just on everybody else's energy. But yeah, you can find fun without alcohol and drugs. It just takes a while to learn that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great discussion for guys in more general, but also guys experiencing mental illness as well. Because as we talked about before, we do use these things as coping mechanisms to keep us either introverted or extroverted or whatever it is. But when you went into that doctor and you got your misdiagnosis of depression and anxiety, like, what did that feel like? Did that set you on a path of discovery or recovery or whatever it is? Like,
Nah,
or was
well,
that actually the opposite effect?
it was a little bit opposite because I got home after getting that because I was programmed to think something's wrong with me. We go to the doctors, we get medication, we come home and we're better. So I remember sitting there like shaking, trying to get these tablets out for the first time and having one. And it was almost an instant change. Like it was like the placebo effect because I found out that it takes weeks and months for
Hmm.
these chemicals to start kicking in. But I didn't change anything else in my life. I just kept drinking, kept going through my usual stressful weeks and days and stuff like that, and just thought, that's okay. I'm on meds now. I'll be fine. But it was just a temporary phase. Some people with bipolar can use antidepressants and stuff like that. But for me, it was the wrong chemicals for the wrong chemical imbalance sort of thing.
Yep.
And it only sort of hid the underlying problem for so long. Then, yeah, experiencing manic episodes after that that were bigger and longer and far more damaging. If I had been correctly diagnosed, that could have prevented that happening. Who knows? But yeah,
Yeah. Wow. I didn't expect you to say more damaging and bigger than. prior to the meds. So there's different types of medications, obviously for bipolar than compared to depression.
Yeah, when it comes to bipolar, there's a fucking list so long it'll take us an hour to read through it. And a lot of the feedback that I get is you can even see funny memes where they've got like a hey it's Saturday wheel and with all these drug names, and then it would be a picture and saying like, this is my psychologist picking which medication to put me on next. And it's just a matter of trying, seeing what happens, and then reassessing it and going through it. So it can be a really, really long process.
Yeah, I've been through about 6 different medications over my time, and some work really well. Some others make me feel really gross, and a lot of weight gain, loss of sexual libido, and all that type of stuff. Have you experienced any different types of side effect to the medications that you've been on?
After my last major episode, I went on an antipsychotic, and that's known for putting on a little bit of weight. But me being a pretty skinny bloke wouldn't have mattered too much anyway. But it did have that effect where I'd take it at night and it would knock me out pretty much straight away. And then I'd wake up the next morning and it'd just feel like I was hungover for most of the morning. And it sort of took away my normal emotions. Like it was hard to feel anything at all, really. Like it
Yeah.
completely blocked me from just being naturally happy or even sad or angry. And it's like almost like it cut off all emotions and just turned me into a zombie sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get medication through like a GP, or did you have to go see a psychiatrist or something like
Yeah,
that?
it was a psychologist, then another psychologist, then a psychiatrist. Didn't click with that one. Then I went and got it. So yeah, it was a matter of finding that right one first. And then finding the right person did help a lot. And a really slow progress, like try it out on a really low dose, then move it up a little
Yep.
bit, and then just a constant monitoring. And yeah, that was over a period of months.
It's an interesting thing, like trialing different medications. I had an experience recently. So at the start of this year, and even coming into halfway through this year, my depression was really bad, and I was getting suicidal ideation, a lot of heightened anxiety. My OCD was just off the charts,
Mm.
and my GP is actually off on prolonged leave. So I'm hoping he's okay after the years that we've had with COVID, and the mental health, I guess, crises that we're having across Australia. So I went to a different GP in the same practice, and I said, I think I need to have a medication review. Things aren't quite right here. And he almost did that same thing with the big wheel. He's like, well, what medication do you want to go on? I'm like, well, I'm asking you as the professional, but his preference was to refer me to a psychiatrist,
Mm.
who's someone who specializes in mental health medication. And I'm glad I did, because I've gone onto a new one that I haven't been on before. I think it's relatively new. It's only been out for a year or so. And all of a sudden, yeah, I feel on a much better pathway now that I've changed meds. It's been a couple of months now, so I've got that slow release happened, and I feel a little bit more like I can feel the highs and I can feel the lows, and I'm not numb, but
Yeah.
the depression's kind of subdued as well. Although I've had a major life change of quitting my job and starting a business. So I'm not sure if that's also contributing as well. So, but it's an important point to make, because we think medications is a scary thing to talk about, particularly as guys. And what stopped me from getting help in the first place was this fear of being on medications, and thinking that only freaks go on medications, only people that have mental illness go on medications.
Mm.
Turns out that I've got a mental illness,
Yeah.
but it's not the end of the world. Like it is, as you say, once you find the right one, and you might go through a few, you do get to a better balanced state where you can feel good, and you don't always feel down and so forth. But as long as we're doing the other things as well, maybe dropping some of the alcohol, drugs, so that the medication can really do its work. Because if we're drinking too much, then the meds won't work so much, or work properly, because they do impact each other as well. But I was interested to know, like, when you started on this recovery pathway, and then when you got properly diagnosed, has it always just been medications, or what's some of the other things that you've used? Like, have you been in counseling or anything like that to help you process this?
Um, Firstly, the medication part that you mentioned, there is a lot of stigma around that, because you think that, someone's taking meds that they must be not normal, but it is quite normal. I don't know what sort of percentage it is of
Mm,
Australians who are on some sort of medication for their mental health, but it's probably more common than what we know because people just don't talk about it. But there's no
yeah.
shame. There's no shame in taking medication.
No.
But sort of my reason and the whole thing around my podcast is teaching people that medication is one tool that we can use, but it's not the only tool. You can't just take it and
Yeah.
expect everything to be better. You've got to do a whole other list of personal development things as well. So yeah, the things that I sort of focused on were my diet and my exercise. Like, even though I was a tradie and I'm physical every day, going up and down ladders and in and out all day, my body got used to that over time. So that wasn't exercise. So I had to
Yeah.
literally, I bought a dog for that purpose so I could go out and start walking and doing some jogging and running and really physically exerting myself. So that way, at the end of the day, I was drained, ready to have a good night's sleep. Um, Changing my diet, there was a lot of fast food, and I was living by myself after my divorce for a while, and yeah, it was just takeout and fast food and beer all the time. And it was no wonder my brain said, you know what, this isn't healthy. Let's just start fucking building our own neurological pathways and trying to make some sort of life out of this. But it just wasn't working. But
Was
yeah,
it like the tradie pie at 7 o'clock in the morning?
yeah, sausage roll and sauce and a big M on the way to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when my kids come over, the times that I had them, I'd be like cooking some pasta and some food and eating a little bit better for their sake. But when they went back to their mum, it was just back into the shit. So once I sort of started, introducing a little bit of fruit and drinking
Hmm.
some water, like
Yeah.
what I hadn't drinking water intentionally for years. Like, I didn't need it. Beer was my water.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but that made a massive change. Just, you see some people like, oh, you need to drink 2 liters or 3 liter, whatever it is per day. But just having, a bottle of water or a liter a day made a massive change with whatever's going on up there in the brain. So yeah, diet, exercise. When I was misdiagnosed with depression and anxiety, that I had an experience with my psychologist for the first time with meditation.
Hmm.
I went in there in quite a stressful state, and he did what's known as a body scan, and he talked me through this, and we did this thing, and I remember sort of waking up and feeling. It felt like I'd just woken up, and it was like a reset button. And for the next little bit, I was sort of experimenting with trying to teach myself how to find that zone and what meditation is and how I can use it and manage my emotions a little bit. But then after probably 6 months or so, I moved in with my now wife, and I stopped focusing on that because I didn't have my own
Hmm.
house, my own place to do it. And that's when things sort of went worse. There was a death in my family as well, which triggered the last episode that I had. It was pretty full on, that last one.
Yeah. Have you got back into meditation?
Yeah. So after going on medication the second time and really getting on top of my self-care, I started doing it pretty much religiously every morning. Um, and it turned out to be so beneficial that I went on and did a course to become a teacher as well.
Oh, cool.
Because I wanted to teach my kids and my friends and anybody else who wanted to learn how to do it. And yeah, so that's probably one of the, like, I mentioned it as my top number one tool in my mental health toolbox, because it completely changed my life.
Yeah. And so, how do you practice meditation at the moment? Because meditation is different for different people. And often, guys, when we think about meditation, we think, oh, that's just wussy. I'm not going to do that.
Mm.
But does it have to be you sitting quietly in a room with incense and
Nah,
Eastern music playing? Like, what
nah.
does meditation look like for you?
I sort of just use a candle. So I'll come in, usually it's dark, and I'll light a candle, and that sort of sends a message to my brain that, okay, we know what we're about to start doing.
Yep.
And it's really good for people with PTSD as well, because instead of closing your eyes, you can do it by just looking at the candle. You don't have to close your eyes at all. And it's more about learning how to focus on just one thing. Like, that's what meditation is. It's just focusing on one thing and one thing only, because that's really, really hard to do. Um, so yeah, and then it's literally, yeah, just sit there. I do 30 breaths, and then um that's pretty much it. If I can do that every morning, I'm happy. But then there are some mornings where I'll do my 30 breaths and feel like I'm starting to get into that zone where I'm just really calm. My mind will silence. And that's where I'll just sort of start doing some longer exhales with a hold, but sort of as long as I can without getting uncomfortable. And then another big slow breath in and hold at the top. And I just get into this. It's hard to explain, but it is very natural, amazing human experience to have when you can actually silence your thoughts. Because yeah, there's like a layer of, it's not really a voice. There's something in us, and it communicates not through words, but um, more with feelings and memories, and it can really help process what's going on in your life and identifying where there's room for improvement, or what we can not control, so we just let that be and we can start focusing on what we can control. And yeah, there's like a guide inside of us that's built in, and once you learn how to get into that, it's life changing.
So you do meditation like sitting down. Do you ever do it like mobile? Like I've tried, I did men's yoga for a while and I found a very similar experience. Like I'd get to, my mind would be racing when I walk into that men's yoga group. And then probably about three-quarters of the way through, I'd get to a moment very similar where things just slow down and I'm able just to focus on the breath and the move and not focused on the 5,000 other things that I was thinking
Yeah,
about when I walked in the door.
yeah,
And I find that through the movement, I could do that. And then we have this beautiful moment at the end where we get 5 minutes just to sit and or lay down and close our eyes and just focus on breath. And the instructor would walk around and tell us to, to think about our breath to the left or our breath to the right or our breath through our toes and all that type of stuff. It sounds really wussy, like, and I'm not going to lie, it does sound like that, but it's powerful. It's such a good release and way to calm the mind and the body. Have you found anything through movement that's helped you, or do you prefer to sit down in that room with the candle?
Yeah, I do like to just sit and do it. I have experimented with mindful walking and taking that one foot after the other, but the more distractions that I've got around me, it's harder to do it. So I like being in a quiet, controlled environment. Um, but that was just the start. Now that I've sort of done it repetitively, now I feel that when I'm driving to work, I can be in this present moment and
Yeah.
mindful and in the here and now. So yeah, it was really hard at the start, sort of building those pathways in my mind. But now that they're there and I've been doing it for over a year, I feel like I'm almost mindful and present throughout most of my day.
Yeah, I love that mindful walking that you mentioned. So I do that as well
Mm,
on the move if I'm going for a walk around the park or whatever. And if I'm struggling to be present on that walk and really just enjoy the walk, I might grab some leaves off a tree and just crunch them in my hand,
yep,
or take notice of the smells in the air. Like spring's a great time for that because the flowers are blooming and whatever. Particularly, I love the smell of freshly cut grass. Or if someone's mowing the lawn
yep,
nearby, I love that smell. It really engages the senses for me. So as you can do it on the move. You can do it in the car. I've done it in the car as well when I'm not even in the car. My kids will be talking, my wife will be talking to me, but my body's there, but my mind is elsewhere. So being able to focus on the steering wheel and just a feeling in your hand
yep.
is an easy way to do it without even anyone knowing that you're being mindful or
Mm.
even meditating in practice as well. So,
Yeah, well,
um,
that's what yoga means. It means union. So between the mind and the body, and it's making that connection. So whether, like, when we're in our head and things are going around and round, to get out of our head and into our body, we need to start using our senses. So like
mm,
using the feel of the leaf, or smelling something, or just looking at something, and using our senses gets out of our head and into our body. And when we're going through a period of anxiety or depression or whatever, it can help pull us out of whatever we're stressing about back into our body, And the more you do that, the more easier it becomes. And it's like riding a bike. Like at the start, you feel like an uncoordinated dickhead.
Yeah.
But then over time and years, you're doing fucking backflips off jumps and shit. So yeah, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And yeah, it is. It's very misunderstood.
It is very, and yeah, and even a shame or a stigma associated with it. You know, this is a hippie thing to do.
Mm.
But when I walk into that yoga class, and I haven't been for a little while, but I'm keen to get back to it. It's just average blokes. There's no hippies in there. There's, it's just
Yeah.
average blokes just trying to stretch and just have a bit of me time. Because I mean, guys don't think about me time too much. We usually associate that kind of thing with our partners or whatever, but it is important to have a bit of me time for that self-care and so forth. So I remember listening to your self-care toolkit. It's a great episode on your podcast, and we talked about when I was a guest on your podcast that it can change, and maybe you've got some new things in your toolkit. So, what's in your mental health or self-care toolkit at the moment?
I've been a big fan of ice baths at the moment. I haven't worked up to actually putting ice in the water yet,
Yeah,
but it's worked into, having a cold shower. People hear that and they're like, fuck, I'm not having a cold shower. Like they think that you just need to turn it on cold, get in and, wash yourself while you're freezing and shit. But it's not like that. The book, the Wim Hof method, is a really good investment and it teaches you the scientifics behind it. But you pretty much just have your normal shower and then at the end, turn that hot off and just wait for the cold to come on. And it's like a big, like you take that breath and you feel it. And it's literally just at the start, it's 3 seconds, maybe 5 seconds, and you're turning it off and you're getting out and you're shivering in your shower. But, after a week or two, you start looking forward to that cold burst. You sort of get a little bit addicted to it and you start to look forward to the cold. But yeah, I'm looking into getting like an ice bath of some sort and yeah, filling it up and just really taking that to the next level.
cool. I have
Yeah.
tried the cold shower at the end. I lasted literally half a second. I was like, "What
Yeah.
am I doing? This is just
Yeah. But
madness."
the key is just doing it consistently. Like set yourself a challenge. Like I'm going to do this for 7 days
Hmm.
and do it every day for 7 days. And by the time the 7 days is over, you're going to be like, fuck, let's bring on another 7 days. And it goes from 3 seconds of to like you're counting through slowly. You're not like doing any major breathing exercises or anything. You're just mind over matter. Like that's
Yeah,
the main thing you learn from that sort of thing. And yeah, so yeah, definitely cold showers is a big tool that I need to add to that toolbox.
love it, love it. Now you're the host of the Stay Mental podcast or Stay Mental Australia podcast, should I say? And I love the show, and I've been a guest on the show, and I love what you're doing with it. Why is it important for you to share your story with the world?
I feel like when I was going through a time where I would avoid the mental health conversation, like we were discussing earlier, um, that there would be other people that are in that exact same position. And I started the podcast as my own personal development sort of thing. Like through meditation, I started to unlock some things that they were like deep seated fears and insecurities that were buried deep down inside. I didn't even know I had them. And one of them is, public speaking and talking in front of a crowd. So I'm like, how do I tackle this to become, the best version of myself that I can be? So I thought, let's start doing some podcasts. And I remember sort of hitting record that first day and read like I literally scripted what I wanted to talk about, and I was reading it and shaking. And I don't know how many episodes I made and then deleted straight away because I didn't want to listen to my own voice and shit like that. So
Yeah,
it was just this experimental, learn a new skill or a new hobby or whatever. But once I started doing that and actually talking about mental health and stuff like that, I noticed that other people were joining in on that conversation, and it sort of evolved into something that I'm quite passionate about now. So yeah, it's just pretty much leading by example, showing people that it's okay to have mental illness and it's not a life sentence. We can work through it. And it's just about, building your own toolbox that works for you. And then, doing the same thing, healing yourself and then healing others.
yeah. Before I started my podcast, a very similar story. So I went through burnout, and I started Mindful Men, the Instagram page, as a way to to kind of do like a daily affirmation thing. I started doing these little quotes, but then I started just talking about my experience of burnout and depression, anxiety, OCD. And it was the same, like other people started to come for the ride. And then I was listening to a whole bunch of other podcasts, and that inspired me to go, well, maybe I need to put a voice to this, not just do the posts and so forth. So then I started doing the podcast, and I think my first few episodes, I didn't really realize that you could edit a video.
Yeah.
So I would stuff up halfway through, stop the podcast, start again,
Yeah.
and I would do that over and over. It would take me 6 hours to do a 20-minute
Yep. Been
20
there.
minute recording.
Yeah.
But some of these, I was listening to a whole bunch of other podcasts in the lead up to that. So are you a podcast listener? Are there some other podcasts that inspired you along to that journey to actually pick a podcast as a medium?
No, I didn't really listen to podcasts before I started doing mine. So that's why I had no idea what they sounded like. But after I sort of started doing those first few episodes, I started looking into other podcasts. There's one called Let's Talk About Mental Health. I think
Yes.
Jeremy Goodwin is the host. And his podcast makes all other podcasts look shit. They are so structured and organized, and they refer to other episodes. They're all numbered and they're just fucking perfect. Like, so that's where I started to like have doubt within myself. Like, I can't compete with this. Like, why am I even trying? But and then I learned that, it's not about comparing mine to his. Yeah, that's the book.
I had Jeremy on. He's a guest on my show, so I had him a couple of weeks ago or a week
Yeah.
ago, and he's coming up as well as a guest on the Mindful Men podcast.
Wow.
And it was a great discussion as well. Jeremy does an amazing job on his podcast, but he's got the YouTube as well. He just
Yeah.
makes mental health discussion so easy.
Yeah, he's definitely evolved over the last year or so since I've found him. And it's just good to sort of watch people's personal development through their journey and see how far he's come, and his little videos now that he does on Instagram. Like, he's what I want to work towards eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, and same. I just grabbed his book after our episode. Actually, I thought I want to get his book and read it, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to opening it up and having a go at it. So
Yeah.
same. I love his podcast. I love Jamie Usher's podcast, The Mind Trader. Jamie's got a great perspective of the world as well. And some of these other guys talking about mental health and mental health issues that I think is a great tool. And podcasts are a great free tool for anyone to access. You can be at work with your earphones in and listening to a whole bunch of different things as opposed to just putting on mind-numbing music or whatever.
Mm.
But they can also like help us learn as well, learn about mental health or mental illness or anything in the world, really. We don't have to, I always like this concept of putting good news in or good information in helps to filter out all the crap that we've got floating around in there.
Yeah, like
So,
when we're learning something, that's really, really good for our body and the way that it regenerates and heals itself. It's like we're kids again. Like, we
yeah,
fall over and we get back up. Like, and yeah, so it's definitely a good thing to sort of do instead of watching the news or listening to commercial radio and just being bombarded by all this consumer bullshit. We can control the content that goes in one ear and stays in there, and it can really help us on our journey.
I think particularly since we've had COVID as well, we had a lot of negative news in the world and so forth. Even what's happening in Russia. It's not that we don't want to understand what's going on in the world or engage with what's going on in the world, but sometimes we just need to shut off and come back to being centered and ourselves just for our own well-being as well, because we've got that 24/7 news cycle, and I know a lot of people that have shut off the news since COVID.
Yeah.
They just can't deal with it anymore. So how's the podcast going? Have you had some awesome guests on there? Who's coming up on the show?
Yeah, well, you were a good guest to have. Yeah, look, when I first started, like, the reason I started getting guests on is I was invited onto a podcast called How I Quit Alcohol. And I haven't been on that podcast yet, but I've got this opportunity to sort of get my podcast to a level so that way, if there is a potential to gain some new listeners, they can come and see what I've got. So I was invited onto that podcast in July. And since then, it's just been like a firecracker lit under my ass. And I'm just on this mission to network with as many service providers, support groups, and anyone passionate about sharing their story and making it their difference in our country. And it's just yeah, it's a really, really big passion that I've just become addicted to. I'm like naturally high when I'm talking to people. But yeah, last week I had Helen Rose on. She's the creator of the Mental Mentor app. I'll be
Hmm.
dropping that episode tomorrow. And I also had, have you ever heard of the book Just One Reason?
No, no. What's it about?
Yeah, so it's this book here. It's like a pocket-sized little thing, and it's like the only book of its type. It's designed to be a suicide intervention book, like an active tool that you could give someone who's really
Yeah.
struggling. And it's a really easy read. And the bloke who created it was pretty much like us. They've been through it. They'd figured out a way to deal with it, and now they're making products and they're providing a service to help other people through it. So yeah, that was the two recent ones. And yeah, I've got a holiday coming up, so I'm planning on sort of giving it a little break for a
Hmm.
while, because I did set a goal of doing one episode per month for the rest of this year, and it's only sort of September, and I've been doing an episode a week for the last 10 weeks. So I've already reached my goal, and now it's just, seeing how far I can take it. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. I'm the same. I'm doing the one episode a week, and I'm thinking, should I have a break over Christmas?
Yeah.
It's
Well, as
probably
long as
time.
you're enjoying it and you've
Yeah.
got that balance, because it doesn't affect my work. I can still do full days at work, do a podcast once in an evening, whatever suits, or on weekends. And it's just that little project that helps keep me motivated, and like I still enjoy painting. I love doing it, and this is just this extra little thing that I can enjoy and not have to worry about, making money or paying bills. It's just something for me and me only, and it's just fucking great.
And you have some amazing conversations with people all over the world. Like I've been interviewing people in the US, and I had one
Yeah.
in Israel recently, which was a really cool conversation, and the UK as well. And it's just it's an amazing, easy, free thing to do, and it's a great little hobby as well. It gets us
Mm.
talking to people across the globe, seeing life in a new perspective, but also realizing that in the mental health space, we're not so isolated. We often feel when we live with mental illness that we're the only person in the world experiencing what we're experiencing, and nobody will understand, nobody would get us. But it's through conversations like this that we realize, oh, there's another bloke out there with bipolar,
Yeah.
and he was drinking and drugs, and now he's not drinking, and he's doing podcasts, and he's also a tradie as well. That sounds like me. These conversations can spark that sense of community in us, even though we might be across the other side of the globe, which is a fantastic medium to do. And that's one of the reasons why I keep doing it. And I love it so much as well. But thinking about your journey, your mental health journey, and your journey as a bloke and a dad and everything like that, if there's something that you know today that you wished you knew, say, 10 years ago, or in your darkest days, what would that be, and what would you tell yourself?
Um, I wish I had have learned about mindfulness back in school. Like when I brought it up to my kids, they're like, "Oh no, they make us meditate at school, and I get in trouble because I can't sit still." And I didn't get upset with that. That validated my idea. I'm like, "This is right. This is what we need to do. We need to teach our kids how to control their thoughts and regulate their emotions and shit like that." Because my parents didn't teach me how to do that. We didn't even know what
No.
mental health was back in the 90s. Like early, like I don't know if it was bipolar or just an early start of the evolution of it, but yeah, having anxiety and stuff in primary school and high school. And if I had have known that these sort of things were normal and we could have just spoken about it, that could have changed everything. But I've been through what I've been through, and I've learned from it, and if I could go back, I probably wouldn't change a thing. I'd just keep being me.
Yeah, and does that shape you as a dad, like for you in the conversations that you have with your kids, like hoping that they could get on top of things earlier than you did?
Yeah, I was in the bookshop the other day, and we're in this section. I go, "Where's the book on parenting?" And they're like, "Whoever writes that book is going to be a fucking millionaire. Like, there's no book." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're true." But um, the biggest thing about parenting is sort of learning to lead by example. a lot of the time you can say, don't do that, don't do that. And then you end up doing it anyway. So it's like monkey see, monkey do. So if
Mm.
the kids see you being a particular way, and I don't want them to grow up experiencing a mental illness. So I need to lead by example and get myself in check and then teach them how to keep themselves in check. So yeah.
But I guess at the same time, like, even if they do experience a mental illness, through your example and you talking about it, they can see, okay, it's okay to open up and talk about it and get help if I
Yeah.
need to as well. And it's
Yeah.
the same with my kids. I'd hate for my kids to live with OCD, for example, and because it is so debilitating, and kept it quiet for 20 odd years. But through my journey, I also know that help is available and treatment's available, and it isn't the end of the world. You can live with it and live through it as well. You can recover.
Mm.
Recovery is possible for any mental illness. It's about finding that right balance and what works for you, whether it's medication, self care, meditation, counseling, whatever it is. Just got to find the stuff that works for us in our own toolkits as well.
Yeah. And
So,
the only person that can do that is us as individuals. Like we can't rely on following the right influencer or being something that just following other people's advice without actually practicing and implementing those changes in our life. Like it's our responsibility. We need to take
yeah.
action and be proactive about it.
Definitely. Man, mate, I've really enjoyed our chat. I always love having a chat with you. You're a great bloke to have a chat with. If I'm ever down in Victoria, I'll look you up and we'll come and go catch up for a non-alcoholic beer. Maybe you can show me the right ones to drink.
Yeah.
Um, but this is a moment for you to plug something. I always like to hear what my guests are enjoying at the moment. So it doesn't have to be anything mental health related. It could be just something that's lighting you up, and maybe some of our listeners can get engaged with and light themselves up as well.
Yeah. So one thing that's sort of been a little inspirational fire that's just kept me like working towards it is this personal goal that I've set for myself through COVID and even before that. As I sort of go through these financial stresses, I've had to sort of sell some motorbikes and all these personal belongings to try and pay for rent and bills and stuff. But I managed to hold on to one of my motorbikes, and I plan on um, literally just strapping a hammock and a sleeping bag to the back of it and doing some sort of motorbike camping. And eventually, like my main goal is to go to Uluru and
Yeah.
spend some time in the central Australia. But before I do that, I'm just going to sort of spend an overnight or summer in Victoria and just do little trips, test out how much my fuel range is and what I need to pack to sort of keep myself up a coffee in the morning and cook some food. So that's my little goal that I've been working on. And sometimes you think about a goal or a dream that you have and you think that it's impossible, like it's just a dream and we'll never be able to do that. But that dream that I had to do this, once I wrote that down on a piece of paper, it wasn't a dream anymore and then become a goal. And then what I did is I broke that goal down into little step-by-step plans and things that I can do to work towards that goal. And now I've got a plan. So now I've just been ticking off one thing each week of like last week, say for example, I bought a little gas burner that goes on top of the gas cans.
Yep.
And then the week after I'll buy, a tarp to set up myself a little covering in case it's raining that night. And then the week after I'll buy a ground mat. So I'm just sort of working slowly up this level until I get to that goal. So yeah, the one thing that I'd recommend anyone to do is to just pick a little goal that has no outcome for anything but your own nourishing your own soul and feeding your spirit, and hold on to that and use that as a little tool to get you through
Cool. I
anything.
love that idea of writing it down and making it reality, not just a
Yeah.
thought. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really cool. Great way to finish the show, mate. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and that you can enjoy the footy next week. I'm looking forward to the game as well. I love watching the footy grand final, and then I love trade week to get rid of all of our dud players. Hopefully pick up a gem, but Adelaide's not very good at trade. So, but anyway, it's been such a nice chat, mate, and I wish you well for the podcast and your own, continued recovery. And I look forward to catching up again soon for another episode.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And just remember, you don't have to get drunk on grand final day. You can stay sober and watch the game and have fun without alcohol. Yeah.
That's my goal next week. So I'm going to
Yeah.
write that one down. Thanks, mate.
See you, mate.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.